Welcome to Front and Center with Steve and Michael. Well, today, folks, my co-partner and friend of almost 14 years now, he's going to actually interview me for this newest journey in my life. I am running for Congress. I'm Michael Maxsenti. I'm running for Congress in the California 47th District, which encompasses Irvine, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, and parts of Seal Beach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner and say, give it to me, partner.
Well, thank you, Michael. Michael, you and I have been friends and colleagues for, as you say, 14 years almost. We've been podcast partners for the past 4 years. I know you, but many in my audience might not. So let's start at the beginning. Why is somebody in their 70s, you should be enjoying your reclining years, why are you going all out, or is it all in, to run for Congress?
Well, it's all in. After the election, and then I had been working, as you know, Steve, but for the audience benefits, I had been working as one of the state, county, and part of the national team for Team Kennedy, which then transitioned to Team Trump at the end. Before that, I had been working as a founder of the Common Sense Party for 4.5 years. I was a state volunteer coordinator for that as well, and the Forward Party to help get it launched here in California. And so I worked with a lot of volunteers throughout the state. And so after the vote, and it appeared that Trump had won, everyone was I was getting lots of calls asking me, what are you going to do, Maxsenti? What should we be doing? And I said, for you right now, I'd like to just suggest this. We've only just landed on the beaches of Normandy. We have only proven to the establishment that we can puncture their control over our government and our political system. And so we've got to get off the beach, scale those cliffs, and it's a long journey that really never ends, but it's a long journey ahead. I said, I'm going to watch, observe, and think about this. So literally every day I thought about it, prayed on it. What was my most important thing that I could dedicate the next, and I said to my wife, last marathon of my life to, that I've been working on consciously for over 15 years now. And by the time the vote was certified on January 6th, then it became clear to me that the most important thing singularly I could do to contribute to this effort is to go to Washington, to get into Congress and help be one of the leaders to help move our government onto a new course, a new path, get back on the old path, if you will, to fulfill the promise of America. And as much as we have this opportunity, I only see it as an opportunity, and the 2026 election is going to be crucial. I wanted to be part of this populist movement, and when I say populist, that is a respect for the rights, the dignity, and the wisdom of everyday people. That's what populism means to me. It's representing everyday people. And that effort has been growing inside of the Republican Party, as evidenced by Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard joining with Trump. So that's why I made the decision to do this, Steve.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your platform and plan. Now, it sounds like you're part of a larger, quote unquote, independence movement. So why don't you talk about that? The significance of your candidacy in 2026, should you win, in terms of creating this, what I think you've talked about, a real populist movement that transcends both political parties.
Yes, well, I've been a part of a group called the United Independent Movement that started forming about 5 years ago under the direction and leadership of Christopher Life, who we've had on our podcast twice. Uh, you and I both attended a conference, a convention down in Austin, Texas, a few years ago, and last year in Denver. I went, and this United Independent effort is bringing together people. Our keynote speaker this last year was Andrew Yang, who replaced Robert Kennedy because after he became a part of the Trump campaign, he could no longer feel comfortable, or we as representing the independent movement. But we've had everybody from Marianne Williamson, who again we've had on our podcast. Tulsi Gabbard was a keynote speaker in Austin, Texas. Andrew Yang this past year. Dennis Kucinich has been involved in this. It's a broad group of hundreds and hundreds of people that have been coming together with the Alliance Party, the Forward Party, the Common Sense Party, all of these efforts to coalesce and work together in a collaborative fashion. And the goal is being focused on the 2026 election to help elect enough members of Congress, no matter what jersey they might still need to wear to get into the system and get elected, whether it's a D, R, I for independent, G, or whatever, that they have committed themselves to a couple of principles. First and foremost, that they represent the people, not a particular party's leadership or the money behind them, that they are an individual who has demonstrated with their life story, not just their words, a commitment of being in service to others, in service to our country, and that they have a high degree of integrity, again, demonstrated integrity, so that we can create a fulcrum block in the House of Representatives. So no matter what the outcome of these 2026 elections as it relates to the majority of Ds or Rs, neither party will be able to function independently of working through us, representing the independent thinking people in the country who are there to help become a bridge. There's one of the things that you and I have been working on, and you'll see in my campaign messaging all the time, that bringing people together, because it's only when we can come together and listen respectfully to each other, converse, dialogue, bring in a holistic perspective of the people, can we really begin to solve these immense challenges of our time and make sure that our government ends up not going down and veering off to this globalist oligarchy, plutocracy, whatever. There's a lot of names for parts of it. Or on the other hand, ventures, we want to make sure it changes course, gets on the path to freedom and sovereignty for all people and fulfilling that original promise of our country. And I came out with a meme that I hope will resonate with people. And it's quite simple. It says our goal, my goal, but our goal together is an America that's great for everyone, because that was always the promise. The founders didn't leave us a perfect union. They left us a path towards one. And so my message is, let's get back on that path together, and asking people to join the movement, to become a rebel for truth. And that's the brand, if you will, that I have had since I launched Rebellious Truths, is a rebel for truth. That was my URL for my email until it was censored. While I was the leader of the Common Sense Party, one of the leaders of the Common Sense Party, Forward Party, and magically it was censored, and no one's been able to get it back. So anyhow.
So, Michael, this is good. I'm curious now, because you talked about your lifetime of experience and commitment. You've characterized yourself prior to, let's say, 2012 or so, as a Reagan Republican. So a couple of questions. First of all, how would you distinguish a Reagan Republican? And then how did your approach broaden from that?
Thanks for the question, because and in our limited time, I won't go into much detail about why I left the Republican Party and then rejoined it. But Reagan was an individual who I believe, and I've read a number of his books. I've spent a day up at his library with a private tour, going into depth about his background from a person who worked for him since he was a pool boy of his in Malibu. And Reagan was an idealist, as I am. Reagan was very principled and, at the same token, very naive. He did not know, because what we refer to now openly as the Uniparty, he was not aware that he ended up going off to Washington as this well-intentioned, principled man of a great communicator. And I wish I had any sense of his humor like you've got, because he was great communicator. He was like us talking to Vince Scully. I mean, he had that grandfatherly wisdom and demeanor, but he was naive of the powers behind and pulling the levers of power in Washington, the Dick Cheneys of the world, who surrounded him and took him down paths that he wasn't aware of that they were doing, like Iran-Contra and other things. He was even, and they don't talk much about it, but there was an attempted suicide on him when they couldn't control him. And I'm sure he was becoming aware of how he'd been manipulated and used, as John F. Kennedy realized and was trying to change things when he was assassinated. So I was a Reagan Republican based on the original principles of the Republican Party based upon Abraham Lincoln and the original Republicans, which was all about freedom, all about equality of opportunity, all about an economic system based upon individuals' rights and sovereignty, not slave labor or anything else. The original principles of the Republican Party is why Reagan was a hero of mine. And that is why I decided to rejoin the Republican Party as a populist Republican, trying to help move forward the populist agenda and make sure to safeguard us against going down a path of the oligarchs and what I've referred to, and you've known for many years, I've said this often, the Hunger Games books were written, and the author that wrote them came out clearly about it publicly, that those books were written to help wake up the millennial generation and others to the long-term consequences of the path we're on. And we've got to get off that path.
Well, good. And I'm also curious that I know that something happened to you when you met some younger people, and that turned you toward bringing people together about beyond the divides. Why don't you just briefly talk about that experience and how it influenced your work for the past dozen years or so?
Well, what really launched me consciously on that path was the meeting with a young 23-year-old, as it turned out, not just progressive, he was an anarchist. And I, at the time, was a Reagan conservative, but we met, had lunch, and the story is there available. If people are interested, go to our YouTube channel and others. It's a little 9-minute cut from that. But out of respect for each other, he would share with me an immense amount of information that he was exposed to and what made him a, quote, anarchist. And I would share with him about why I was a Reagan conservative. But we quickly realized is that we shared most of the same values. But and that's where I began to realize is the combination of working together, listening. That's what is essential. Going back to our founding fathers, you had people from Hamilton who was a 21 or 22-year-old young, energetic, visionary idealist, and Madison, who was 33 or 25, and Jefferson at 33, coupled with a Washington at 44 and a Benjamin Franklin at 70, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and worked together then. And then 11 years later, that culminated in the signing of the Constitution. And now Benjamin Franklin was in his 81, and all of them had aged 11 years. But it's the blending of the young visionaries with the older, hopeful people who have gained wisdom and life experiences, the balancing of the cross generations that really brings forth the best. And I had said to Chris in that introductory for Rebellious Truths that he inspired me, that it wasn't that as you grew older, you became conservative because of the need for money or the understanding, if you will, of how the world works better. And there's all kinds of different thoughts on that. But I said, no, it's that what really happens is we lose and walk away from our idealism. It becomes self-interest. And that's where working with the youth has always been an inspiration to me, because they help me keep focused on the vision of what we can be and inspire me that what I'm doing is to help open the doors so that it will be possible for those younger people and future generations to help create a more beautiful and just world that our hearts know is possible.
That's great. I love the bridging idea. And of course, in the Federalist Papers, we had people who were, quote unquote, very conservative and others who were very, quote unquote, liberal, who were all working together for a common good, which was to recognize that we all wanted to be independent of the king. We all wanted to be independent of the first multinational corporation, the British East India Company, right? That was the first multinational that we could think of. And so there was a higher good that people were ascending to. Now, right now, we seem to be in a descending mode, as in simultaneously, there's the greatest polarization we've ever known in this country, maybe even greater than the Civil War in certain regards. And yet there is a deep longing in the heart that people have to collaborate and cooperate. And it's very interesting, the district that you happen to be running in, which has been your home district since you were a kid, really, is one of the swingingest, a young man, one of the swingingest of the swing districts. And I understand that the current occupant, congressperson is a Democrat. And you're running as a Republican in the primaries as a Republican. Tell us more about this district and why you feel that you're in a good position to swing the swing district independent.
Thanks for that question, because it's so important for people to understand. First and foremost, our California District 47 it's like a perfect storm for someone like myself, I believe. Every congressional district is partitioned into roughly, within one, maximum 2%, 540,000 registered voters. Our district has a unique, amazing split. Literally 3,000 registrations separate the Democratic Party from the Republican Party. It's a dead even split. 35% Democrats, 35% Republicans, and then the other 30% is made up of just under 24% no party preference, and the other 6% is made up of other minor parties registrations, which would include people who are still registered with the Common Sense Party or Forward Party California. But we have a unique position in California called the American Independent Party, which actually represents the bulk of the others. They represent, I believe the number is, of that 6%, they represent 4% of our total vote, and in our state and here. But this district is a perfect storm because the NPPs and people of minor parties or others will really decide who's going to take this seat and represent this district. And currently, I'm the opponent who will, I'm sure, without a doubt, unless something strikes him down, and I hope that doesn't happen, physically, he will be running, and that's Dave Min. And Dave Min typifies what I'm running against, which is the whole belief and functionality of career politicians. Dave Min exemplifies the career path and a career politician. He has come out of an elite undergraduate school, came out of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. He then went to Harvard. He then magically ends up working on the staff as an advisor to Chuck Schumer. He then gets to come back to California, where he's given a position as not a professor, but an associate professor teaching law. And soon as a seat opens up for the California State Senate, he's plugged into that, given millions of dollars to win a California State Senate seat. For 4 years, he goes off to Sacramento and does everything to rubber stamp the policies in California of the Democratic supermajority. Then, as soon as Katie Porter runs for Senate, he's plugged in and anointed as the person to take her seat in District 47. They plowed in, I believe the number was $8 million for him to get elected and take this seat and continue with it as a Democrat. He exemplifies somebody and I don't want to be on too much of a tangent here, but career politicians, why I'm so against career politicians is first and foremost in Congress, over or roughly 70% of them are all attorneys. And an attorney is trained, some of the best minds in our country with some of the best schooling are trained to be nothing more than an advocate for a position. All they focus on is how to win that argument and call it a win. They have been trained how to manipulate the message, manipulate the facts, manipulate the jury or the judge to get the outcome of a win for their side. The other 30% roughly of members of Congress, not all, but most, come out of a similar privileged background or who rose up through hard work into that privileged position of wealth and lost touch with the common, ordinary working person. And so you go off to Congress and all these people care about is getting reelected, and they either don't have the skill or they don't have the will, or they've been corrupted by the money and the power that comes with it, being treated like a rock star, and they want to hold on to their jobs, so they're willing to say and do anything. And one of the things that's important for our audience to understand is, and these Senate hearings that we just had couldn't have made it more clear to anyone who watched them or those who've listened to any sound bites from them. You had people lined up against people of high integrity, qualified to do these jobs, and they would sit there and falsify their backgrounds, what they've done, what they said, what they stood for, lie directly to the American people repeatedly. And then those sound bites are taken out, spread quickly around the country, and characters are assassinated, people's reputations are impinged, and they're held to total immunity. In the Constitution, there's the speech and debate clause, which gives anyone in Congress, including senators, total immunity from any prosecution for anything they say while on the floor of the Senate or the House, or in the execution of their duties in a chamber of a committee. So these people could sit there, and I'll use Bernie Sanders as an example here, who I almost would have voted for him had he not had that changed, taken away from him back with Hillary's and the Democrat Party. But Bernie has been a huge disappointment to me. And I know there's a lot of people out there who love Bernie still. And I would challenge them. When Bernie was called out by Robert Kennedy about how much money he accepts from the pharmaceutical industry, as he's calling Robert Kennedy all kinds of names And same thing with Pocahontas. These are some of the people who've benefited the most from their campaigns for money that has been funneled either through their members or employees or through super PACs to support these Congress people. And they'll sit up there and make bold-faced lies over and over that then get repeated through social media and believe, because people go, oh, well, they're in Congress. They must have access to more information than I have. And if they're saying this about that individual, it must be true. And it becomes truth in their mind because the people they respect are lying to them. And they have total immunity.
Right around election time, we did an interview with Christopher Life. We actually ran an interview he had done with someone else. And one of the points that he made that was so pertinent, again, Christopher is the convener of this new independent, what is it called? United Independence.
Right.
Yeah. And he was saying that this is probably true of both sides, but certainly he was talking about the progressive side, that they failed to recognize the difference between news and propaganda, that they assumed that they were being told the news, and they didn't even imagine that the news was shaped by propaganda and narratives. And, what you were talking about, back when I was a kid in New York, there was the Tammany Hall, which was the Democratic Party. It was Machine. It was called the Machine. And by machine, it was simply a system that you enrolled in, like your congressman there in your district. And it's the way that the career path to work your way up the party. And the way you work your way up the party is you don't question the party leaders. You stick with the program. So, and this is true of both parties. There's very few true independents in the mix. And so basically, you're getting one narrative banging up against the other, and there's no wedge, there's no representation for what you're talking about, which is a middle way, as we characterize it on Front and Center, from political battlefields to cooperative playing fields, seeking to hold truth together, putting our government on the side of the people and having our people determine the country's future. And I want to just, expand on something you said a little while ago, which is, as part of this independent caucus, let's say that there may be 10 or 20 congressional candidates who are either, I would like to call them front and center Democrats or front and center Republicans, who are not going to go along with their party line. They just happen to run on that, wearing that color or shirt. And that could become a true independent voice and a true swing in Congress to actually represent this elusive alliance between progressives and populists and conservatives who believe in the rule of law, etc. So this is why, this is not just one Don Quixote character running for Congress. You're part of a concerted campaign that is a national strategy, which is largely absent. So I want to come back to your swing district. Now, you happen to be running as a Republican. Well, right now, one would have imagined that after the election that the polarization would calm down for a little bit, and it did for maybe 15 minutes. We missed it. It happened. We missed it. And so right now, of course, one of the issues, and I take this as a very important issue, is Donald Trump, arbitrary rule of one person, standing up against the courts. Some would say turning due process into due process. So I'm wondering that where you stand on this, because you are wearing the Republican shirt. Is there going to be a time, or could there be a time, where you draw the line and say, I'm not going to go along with the party line in this regard?
It's a great question. Thank you. Couple of key points I'd like to make on that. First and foremost, We elected a president, not a dictator, not a monarch. And my only commitment is first and foremost to my God, to the Constitution, my conscience, and my constituents, not to Donald Trump or anyone else. Much of what Donald is doing is essential. He does it in a very different way than might most approach it, but he gave us this opportunity. So I have no problem in going against Donald Trump on a few key areas or any area that I think goes against the Constitution or would take us down onto a path that lead us towards more oligarchy control, etc. An issue that is tough to understand, and this is where it gets so nuanced, the issue of Iran, which is major right now, the possibility of war with Iran. On the surface, it's really easy for one side of the people who want to undermine and so they can gain back control of the White House and Congress is to yell and scream about this goes against free speech and goes against some of the things that he said during the campaign, etc. But if you dig deeper into the strategy of which Trump is really different in his approach, he is about winning. The question always will be on issue by issue. Is it for the people or is it for moneyed interest? But that's setting that aside. This issue of Iran, going back to what Obama did with the treaty that was signed, I forget the enumeration, but Trump was opposed to it at the time. But his strategy now, which is a very different approach, is not to tell your opponent, the opposition, what you're going to do. Just like with tariffs, you don't go out and announce, yeah, I'm going to put this ridiculous tariffs on you to get you to the bargaining table so that we can come up with a reciprocal, even balanced trade. Because all the countries that we've helped rebuild on the backs of the American people, those tariffs need to go away now, and we need to have zero tariffs actually between Canada, Europe, etc. But to Iran, it's much more difficult because Iran, the IRI, was the Islamic Republic in Iran. That's the official legal name, the IRI, and which has devastated the population and anyone who stands against them for the last 42 years, I believe. Those people, you can't go tell them what your strategy is, but Trump has a very different approach. He's trying to bring that ruling group down, out of power. What they have done to the people of Iran is despicable at all levels. So you can't, on the surface, always go against him when he seemingly does something that seems bad, like bombing the Houthis. There may have been some mistakes. It may have been bad parts. But when you can see a broader strategy of trying to help take down Iran, because Iran has not taken any responsibility for its proxies who have been fighting directly against the United States, Europe, and Israel. And the people of Iran have suffered terribly. So there's subtleties to it. So sometimes it's really easy to say I'm for or against something. Other times it's far more nuanced. And one of the things that I hope I will always do is try to speak from a position of as much knowledge that I can gain from as many perspectives as possible, which could lead us into a whole other discussion. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I think this is very important because the way that mainstream narratives on both sides go is they're essentially very immediate and very current eventsy, and they don't really like going back and looking at perhaps what the nuances are. Ukraine being an example of that. Iran, in fact, as the CIA deplatformed Mossadegh in 1952, installed the Shah, and when the Shah got deposed because of corruption, etc., and the Ayatollah took over, we've been paying the price now for 45 years. And the people of Iran who absolutely love Americans. They love Americans. That's the sad part, is that there is a real heart connection between the American people and Iranians, and actually Jews and Iranians for that matter. So we're dealing with a very intractable situation here, and the pussyfooting way of let's kick it downfield, which has characterized the status quo, and I think a lot of people have been tired of that, and so let's just blow everything up now. So we're in a very, very dicey world situation now, and you're in a position where you're walking that line. You're trying to bring the whole a more complete truth to the conversation when everybody is on fire with their position. So how do you see walking that line for the next year and a half as you're doing this this campaign? Walking that line.
Well, a couple ways. One is, first and foremost, always speaking my truth. And people, when they hear the word truth, I want to make it clear to people, what is truth? The only person that really understands the real whole truth of anything, other than when we're talking about adding up physical elements, that's a truth everybody can agree. But other than that, the only person who really understands the whole truth is God, spirit, whatever people have labeled that spirit, that force that took from chaos to make us and this planet. So truth is from one's perspective. And I would like the audience to listen for a second on this. If you've been at a corner of an automobile accident and an accident happened and you saw it from the northeast corner, from your end, the red car was clearly at fault, da 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 da. If you were on the southwest corner and you saw it from your perspective, you would think it was the black car that was at fault because from your perspective. And if you were both interviewed separately, you would swear on a stack of Bibles to one perspective as being your truth and the truth of the fact, and somebody on the other side being the truth of the fact. But it's if you look at all the cameras that were there, and all of a sudden there's a camera that shows clearly who was at fault, now you can accept it. And another analogy for others to make it real clear, we've all watched sporting events where from your perspective, when you saw the play on the camera, the first camera angle, the referee made a terrible, terrible call. And the next 2 or 3 camera angles show it was a terrible call. The fans are booing, everybody's upset. They get around to that 5th call. One time in a Super Bowl game, it was the 9th camera angle that showed that the ref made the right call. And if you lack the curiosity to continue to always be open to someone else's perspective, and being willing to ask them, why do you believe the way you believe? What might you be seeing that I don't see that will help us get to a more expanded truth? And that's what we need to approach. That's what many of our conversations on our podcast and others has been about, seeking that whole truth together, having the curiosity and the willingness to continue to ask questions and then listen, because from your perspective, you may think you have the truth, but that could be accurate or it could be totally inaccurate. So I want to define for people something else when I said earlier about, quote, my brand is a rebel for truth. And rebel is not what most people would assume. It's not from the movie characters and that. Rebel is quite simply, and that's why you see the dots after each of the letters to draw people's attention. And it's right on our website, and it is taken directly. This has been the exact same thing with one word I changed from Rebellious Truths, which was the nonprofit that I co-founded with that young progressive anarchist in 2010. Rebel is defined as, the R is recognize the status quo has failed us. E, educate yourself with nonpartisan facts and possible solutions. B, be aware our representatives don't represent us. That's how it was on Rebellious Truths. Now I like to say, be aware most representatives, because there are some, and there's going to be a lot more. And if I get into Congress, I will be there to represent you. But right now, be aware most of our representatives no longer represent us. Engage diverse sources of information and people. And lastly, the L, lend yourself to the movement in some way. That is what it means to be a rebel for truth. And that's what I want people to understand, is to ask people to become a rebel for truth. Help us. And that's what we're about. That's what my candidacy is all about.
You know, I could see that the Common Sense Party is still infusing itself, because what you're actually talking about is a common sense consensus that most people have in their hearts. You know, we've been led around by two political narratives that tend to focus on the extremes, that tend to focus on escalating our differences, getting people fearful and angry about the other side. And so in your district, you have the opportunity to have entirely different kinds of town hall meetings where there is a great listening. And that as a representative of the people, and not the people who are, you know, not the paid interests or your political party, you have the opportunity to represent what's at the heart and soul of this country that's been lost. And, you know, all of those REBEL, it's all about fundamentally the rules of the game. It's not about this policy or that policy. It's about who's in charge of who's in charge. And that's kind of the issue that mainstream politics refuses to face. They want to keep us on the battlefield, one against the other. So in the few minutes that we have left, Michael, is there something that I didn't ask that you would like to address?
Yes. Two things. First and foremost, people will hear me constantly use the term, and they'll hear from others, the establishment. So I want to help clarify and define that. Establishment, when I speak of establishment, that is anyone and any organization that has benefited from the status quo. And what that could be, it could be as innocuous as someone who is working in one of those departments, the CDC, those good people who were working in those departments who are now being threatened with, or who have been laid off, who have chosen to either look the other way, ignore the realities of their life when they go out there, or who purposefully accept their position and go along with it so that they can just keep their job. Because these issues of our health in America didn't just spring up. Those people didn't just, if you were working in the CDC or these other departments that were supposedly to protect our health, you didn't just go home and couldn't see that 40+% of Americans were diabetic and with chronic diseases, etc. It just didn't happen. This issue of autism, these things. So you either were incompetent or chose to look the other way. On the other side of the coin, those people who consciously made decisions to look the other way, to knowingly allow things to continue while our people were being poisoned slowly and some quickly, dying. The fact that our country has the poorest health by far of any industrialized country in the world, and yet we pay 2 to 3 times for our health care. So if you're from the leadership in those things to a daily worker, you're part of the establishment. You're part of the status quo that needs to be shattered, because we need results that deliver effective solutions for the American people, for our planet, and the world. And we have the resources to do that. So I want to make sure people understand the term establishment is representative of anybody who has been benefiting from the status quo. And when you hear me say we must shatter the status quo, and that's what we're referring to. And that's the establishment. And it can also be those people in the World Economic Forum, those global corporatists. It can be a lot of people, a lot of organizations. So I wanted to clarify that. Lastly is I would like to touch on my story. because a lot of people will look at me and go, oh, he's a rich, privileged guy, old white guy at that. And they don't understand the depths of me. One of the most difficult things that I've had to, as I can laugh with my wife about, I'm in candidate boot camp. I have never thought of running for office before. Well, I shouldn't say never, because I was back in the early 90s considering it. But in the last 30 years, I have not at all thought about running for office. I chose the path of trying to help put in place systemic changes through cleaning up our political system so that it could go from an ossified position that our founders and their genius created to a functioning government that was designed to evolve with the consciousness of our people and to meet the challenges of our frontiers and our times. It's been ossified. So I thought my best course was to help with political parties breakthrough. That proved to be impossible because the way they've rigged the system. Then it was like, all right, we have an exemplary candidate like Robert Kennedy Jr. That could not break through even. So my story is I went from being come out of that working class environment. I'm not going to go into it like some of the other former candidates and others, but I did grow from factory worker parents up to live a life of privilege. I came up, and by the time I got into my early 40s, a deep sense of gratitude began to overtake me of an appreciation that I had lived and been given an opportunity to live a life that exceeded all of my dreams as a child or my family's expectations for a member of our family. I was the first to go to college, etc. I was able to rise up from a rookie salesperson to the youngest president of a division of American Standard Corporation at 33 years old. I was chosen on a national search to become the COO of a joint venture for Nissan and another company, a Japanese corporation. To create the finest graphic arts company in the world was the goal. I was given that opportunity to build a facility here in Irvine and hire people. And then I was given the gift of a son late in life that fulfilled a deep desire I had to have a child. I had been a step parent for many years, but I wanted my own child. And my wife at the time and my mother of both Heather and my son, we had lost 2 children. And after the loss of that second child, in a prayer, I made a promise to God that if he would bless me with a child, I would put being a parent ahead of anything. I was blessed with that child. And so I was reminded of that through an event that I founded for Children's Hospital called Heroes of the Heart by William Bennett at dinner, the inauguration event, when he said the reason he decided not to seek or accept the Republican nomination for president because of his son that was entering high school, another entering middle school, and he felt that he'd been far too much removed from their lives, and it was crucial that he become a father and put that ahead of any other priorities. And that reminded me, as my son had just turned 3, of my promise to God. A few months later is when I decided to totally withdraw from any political thinking and left that path until he was getting ready to go away to college. So out of a sense of gratitude of this amazing life that these successes had given me, the opportunity to travel to Europe many times, to the Orient, to work closely with the Japanese and with other nationalities and people of all backgrounds, live in Laguna Beach, where I raised my family for 35 years, built a beautiful 4,400 square foot home on one of the most beautiful, privileged, prestigious streets in Laguna, behind a gated community. I was realizing I had this amazing life. That's when I began to start back into the politics. Well, life has a way of saying you need to learn a lot more. So after making this commitment to rebellious truths in this political journey, I sold my publishing business that I'd started when I left the COO position of Nissan. I started a publishing business, which I've had for 20 years, sold that business with the intention of being able to fund my retirement for my wife and I, and devote still as a volunteer to this effort. Well, 2 years after that, the guy I sold it to, a venture capitalist, bankrupted that business, wiping out my wife and I. So I was faced with a real challenge. Here I was, after having open heart surgery for some genetic problems. I had a choice: figure out a way to stay in the fight, downsize significantly our lifestyle, walk away from playing 75 rounds of golf a year, surfing 50 sessions a year, skiing 20 or 30 sessions a year, living truly that privileged lifestyle that I had worked my butt off to get up and earn, suddenly was taken away. We went through personal bankruptcy to survive. I had to take my pension from American Standard early, Social Security early. My wife volunteered to start dog sitting. I ended up driving Uber, gave over 4,000 rides for Uber. Then I went to work for a limousine company that hired me. I tried doing that as well, but it conflicted with the political commitments. And then I did my own driving service, which I still do drives to this day. Very few because I don't have time, but that allowed me to stay in the fight. Because I could go on and off the app for Uber. I could accept rides for the limousine company that fit around my commitments to conferences, Zooms, etc. But it gave me the opportunity to experience life like vast majority of Americans do every day. And sleeping nights in my car at LAX, I cried myself to sleep more than once. What did I do to deserve losing everything? I thought I'd lived a good life. I thought I'd been giving back for all these years to so many different areas. But I didn't know then, that I'm grateful for now, that I needed to be immersed in the real experiences that the vast majority of people are forced to live in. And that's not what life or God or spirit intended for us. We weren't put here to just be nothing more than worker bees or ants, to be slaves for monarchs and dictators. That is not our intended purpose. And I couldn't be more grateful, for it was out of a sense of gratitude for all that I was given, and then the learning that God put me on this journey, that I made this commitment to run for office so that I could go to Washington to represent the people, to be a bridge, to be part of that national effort to get our government back on its path that our founders had shown us, so that we can truly become that nation to be proud of and pass on to future generations that we were given the opportunity to live.
What a great wrap up, and that recognition that many people don't get if they've lived only the privileged life, that what other people are going through. I think that's part of the out of touchness of what you would call the establishment, and then being puzzled why they didn't get reelected, because that's what they represent. They represent being isolated from what most people go through. And this humbling experience that you describe is actually an elevating experience that's put you into, it's really set you on course in your life purpose, and being a beacon for other people. So I really appreciate, I know you well. I hadn't heard that perspective quite, and I know our viewers are going to be moved by that for real, that's not just a story, it's a lived life that is now available for other people to build on as you run your candidacy. So I want to thank you so much, Michael, for putting yourself on the line, for taking this kind of risk, for going through the kinds of self-questioning, like, am I crazy doing this? You're not. You're radically sane and you're helping other people find that way themselves. So
Before we close the podcast, so Steve, I want to say something too. Uh, you have been an immense help and a friend through all of this, and helped broaden my perspective and the people that you've brought into my life and my awareness. I hope people will look at Front and Center, our podcast, and go there and watch some of these amazing people that we had the wonderful opportunity to have conversations with about seeking the whole truth together, about original politics, the influence of our founders, the Iroquois Indians on our founders, and how our republic is a direct reflection of the Confederacy of the Iroquois Nation. So many things, the conversations with Foster Gamble, with Christopher Life, with one of my most important mentors, and he's a young mentor, is our dear friend, Charles Eisenstein, and the influence he's had on my life. He and Robert Kennedy Jr. have had probably the two most influential people living in my life. And it was the inspiration of Robert Kennedy Jr. and his story of how he came back and what he's doing. And Charles Eisenstein, who continues to hold that lantern to help us know where to navigate towards. So thank you again, Steve, for your friendship, for the help that you've added to broadening my perspective. And I know there's going to be many more opportunities for both of us and in our continued journey. So thank you.
And by the way, thank you, Michael, for acknowledging our interviews on Front and Center. They're evergreen. They never expire. They are pertinent, even perhaps more today as we are in this polarization, to find some of the uniting ideas to remind us of who we are together. Thank you for the work you're doing, and I'm blessed to be your friend.
It's mutual. Thank you.